Welcome to This Explainer. We usually picture history as this super dignified, serious march of progress, right? Full of stoic leaders and brilliant, life-changing innovations. But honestly, the truth is that history is often way stranger, much funnier, and a whole lot deadlier than fiction. Today, we're going to ditch the pristine textbook pages and dig into the absolute most bizarre blunders and pure chaos that humanity has somehow managed to survive. Well, or in some cases, completely failed to survive.
Let me ask you something, and really think about it for a second. Do you think modern life is chaotic? We're always complaining about traffic, right? Or confusing technology, or whatever weird trend is going viral on the internet today. But I promise you, whatever absurdity you're dealing with today literally pales in comparison to the sheer hubris, the unbelievable gullibility, and the spectacularly terrible decision-making of the past.
So, here is our agenda for today's Cabinet of Curiosities. We're going to cover 1. History's most brazen scams. 2. Inventions that killed inventors. 3. Deadly Victorian fashion trends. And finally, 4. History's most ridiculous riots.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, History's most brazen scams.
Elaborate deceptions definitely aren't a new thing. Long before those sketchy internet phishing emails, we had con artists. And fun fact, con is actually short for confidence, because they completely build up your trust before totally fleecing you. Some of these historical cons were so bold, it's honestly hard to believe anyone actually fell for them. Just ask yourself, would you ever in a million years buy the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal? I mean, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? It's one of the most famous landmarks on Earth. But back in 1925, someone completely fell for it. So picture this. It's 1925, the Eiffel Tower is actually looking a bit rusty, and there are real newspaper articles arguing that it's just too expensive for the French government to keep up. Enter a guy named Victor Lustig. He sees his golden ticket, right? He poses as this highly secretive government official, calls a meeting with some scrap metal dealers, and tells them the tower is being quietly sold for scrap so the public doesn't freak out. And one dealer, André Passon, buys the story hook, line, and sinker. He hands Lustig 70,000 francs, which was basically free money for Lustig, who immediately hopped a train to Austria. The buyer was so embarrassed he never even reported it to the police. Lustig's luck eventually ran out, though. He got busted in the US about a decade later for a massive counterfeiting ring.
But Lustig definitely wasn't the only mastermind out there. Take Gregor MacGregor back in the 1820s. This guy literally invented a completely fake Central American country called Poyais. He wrote up these incredibly detailed, completely made-up pamphlets, promising investors this thriving tropical paradise with cathedrals, an opera house, a bank, and literal rivers flowing with gold. He actually managed to secure what would be nearly $44 million in modern money. But the reality? Oh, it was a nightmare. When about 250 hopeful settlers finally sailed over to their new paradise, there was zero opera house, no bank, just a thick, uninhabited, hostile jungle. Tragically, more than half of those people died from exposure and starvation, while MacGregor just casually fled to Paris to try and pull the exact same scam again. Absolutely wild.
Moving right along to Section 2, Inventions that killed inventors.
So, there is a really fine line between visionary ambition and a total disregard for basic safety. And when inventors cross that line, their own creations often end up taking them out. Take Radiator, for instance. It hit the market in 1925, pushed by William Bailey, who, by the way, was a Harvard dropout falsely claiming to be a medical doctor. He pitched Radiator as this magical, universal cure-all. It was supposed to fix everything from depression to high blood pressure. But what was it actually? Radiator was literally just small doses of radium salts dissolved in water. It was straight-up radioactive water. Back then, radium was this shiny new discovery, so greedy salesmen like Bailey hyped it up as an energy booster when they were essentially tossing tiny radioactive grenades into people's bodies. And because Bailey gave doctors financial kickbacks to prescribe it, over 400,000 bottles were sold.
The human cost of this was just devastating, and it's best seen through its most famous consumer, a guy named Ebenezer Byers. He was a wealthy amateur golf champ who got prescribed Radiator for some arm pain. Over the course of 3 years, he drank 1,400 bottles of the stuff. The physical toll is hard to even think about. The radioactive decay inside his body just sliced right through his tissues and bones. He suffered massive weight loss, his bones turned incredibly brittle, literal holes formed in his skull, and both his upper and lower jaws had to be surgically removed. When he finally passed away in 1932, his body was so radioactive they had to bury him in a lead-lined coffin. It's a really grim warning about untested medical miracles, for sure.
Okay, let's jump forward to the 1970s.
Aerospace engineer Henry Smolinski decided he was going to cure highway traffic by inventing a flying car called the AV Mizar. His big plan? He was going to fuse a Ford Pinto together with the wings and engine of a Cessna Skymaster aircraft. The flaws here were, well, catastrophic. First off, the Ford Pinto was incredibly heavy. We're talking 2,000 pounds, which just completely overburdened the aircraft frame. And the connections holding the car and the wings together, investigators later found they were incredibly shoddy, questionable welds. We are talking about the engineering equivalent of duct tape here. Ignoring a ton of red flags and safety warnings, Smolinski decided to test fly it himself in 1973. The compromised wings completely disintegrated mid-flight, sending the car plummeting to the ground and killing the inventor instantly.
Now for Section 3, Deadly Victorian Fashion Trends.
We usually think of the Victorian era as being all about extreme modesty, right? Just showing off wealth through layers and layers of excessive clothing. But this extreme vanity literally became a matter of life and death. 2,000 to 3,000. I want you to think about that number for a second. That is the estimated death toll of a single, horrifying event that was massively exacerbated by a fashion trend. So, in the mid-19th century, the crinoline cage was the absolute height of fashion. It was this big steel frame you'd wear under a dress to give it a massive, poofy bell shape. And these things were huge, sometimes reaching 6 feet in diameter. They were already super inconvenient, constantly getting caught in carriage wheels or factory machinery, but their absolute deadliest flaw? Fire. In December of 1863, a fire broke out inside a church in Santiago, Chile. There were thousands of women inside, and pretty much all of them were wearing these massive, highly flammable crinoline dresses. As soon as the panic set in, people frantically rushed for the doors, tripping all over each other. The fire caught the fabric and spread like wildfire. But the absolute worst part was that because the dresses were so incredibly wide, the women literally could not fit through the exits. A massive wall of human bodies just blocked the only way out, trapping the survivors inside before the roof finally caved in. It's a completely senseless tragedy where the sheer geometry of their clothing sealed their fate.
And the danger wasn't just for the people wearing the clothes, it was incredibly deadly for the folks actually making them. I'm sure you've heard the phrase mad as a hatter, right? Well, it comes directly from this exact era. Hats were a massive industry back then, specifically these really nice felt hats. But the manufacturing process, which was called carroting, was intensely toxic. Hat makers had to take animal pelts and literally saturate them in a boiling solution of mercuric nitrate just to separate the fibers and make the felt pliable. The chemical reaction would actually turn the felt this dark, carroty orange color.
But what this meant on a daily basis was that these factory workers were constantly breathing in totally toxic mercury vapors. Prolonged exposure to this stuff led to a horrible condition called erethism, or Mad Hatter's disease. It is a severe, debilitating neurological disorder that causes intense depression, delirium, and these uncontrollable physical tremors. And it was horrifyingly common. By 1934, up to 80% of surveyed hat makers in New Jersey were showing symptoms of mercury poisoning. Making the fashion was genuinely deadlier than wearing it. Yet, mercury usage in American hat making wasn't even banned until 1941, and frankly, even then, the government only banned it because the military suddenly needed all that mercury to make detonators for World War II.
And finally, Section 4, History's Most Ridiculous Riots. We usually assume riots are sparked by, deep systemic political unrest or massive social injustice. But sometimes sheer explosive chaos erupts over the absolute most absurd things. 800,000. Let me explain that number. In 1992, Pepsi ran this massive promotional contest in the Philippines called Number Fever. The concept was simple. You check the 3-digit number under your bottle cap, and if they announce your number on TV, you win. The grand prize was a cool 1 million pesos. To put that into perspective, that was about 51 times the average annual salary over there at the time. It was a brilliant marketing move, ballooning Pepsi's local sales by 40%. Now, the budget accounted for exactly 2 grand prize caps being printed with the winning number, which was 349. But because of a massive computer glitch at the bottling plant, they didn't print 2. They accidentally printed 800,000. So overnight, Pepsi was suddenly on the hook for over $32 billion in accidental prize money. Obviously, they couldn't pay that. When the company desperately tried to backpedal and offered people a tiny $18 compensation fee instead, the entire country erupted. Enraged citizens formed a group called the 349 Alliance. And they didn't just casually boycott, they actively rioted in the streets. Delivery trucks were flipped and burned. One extremist protester even lobbed a live grenade into a Pepsi warehouse, tragically killing 3 workers. Literal street warfare broke out, all over a soda bottle cap misprint. But hey, if we're talking about totally predictable disasters, we absolutely have to talk about the infamous 10-cent beer night in Cleveland, Ohio, back in 1974. The Cleveland Indians front office thought it would be a fantastic, totally foolproof promotion to sell unlimited cups of beer for just a dime a pop to a crowd of over 25,000 fans. What could go wrong, right? Well, in innings 1 through 3, it was just heavy, aggressive chugging. By inning 4, the liquid courage completely took over and streakers started rushing the field. By the 9th inning, the crowd had basically devolved into a weaponized mob. Fans were hurling firecrackers, glass bottles, and literal stadium chairs at the opposing Texas Rangers. It got so bad that players on both teams actually had to grab baseball bats just to defend themselves against the rioting fans before fleeing into the locker rooms to survive. The game ended in a total forfeit and a completely trashed stadium.
So as we wrap up this explainer, looking back at all the fake jungle countries, the radioactive health water, the 6-foot flammable dresses, and the dime beer riots, I have to leave you with one final provocative question. Knowing everything we just talked about, which of these historical blunders are you most likely to fall for? Because as much as we really love to think we've evolved past this level of sheer chaos, human hubris, and our desperate desire for a quick fix or a ridiculously good deal, yeah, that hasn't really changed at all. Thanks so much for joining me on this wild journey through the past. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I will catch you on the next explainer.